a lot of in robotics, it's more about the work and the achievement outside the body that is interesting for robotics in industry and painting cars and doing things out there in outside the body. But the dancers or a stage performer, it's the movement itself that we want to be expressive. Developing technology means for a singer that's also a way of develop new technologies and new ways of moving and singing. That's also kind of development in the art forms also. So it's not, we don't play on the same instruments, we don't sing with the same kind of voices, we develop new ways of moving bodies and singing. So
hello and welcome. Åsa Unander-Scharin is a professor of music performance at Luleå University of Technology. She works with the study of the intersection between opera, dance, music, interactive technology and robotics. Her artistic work started in 1998 when she created the first choreography for an industrial robot, with many acclaimed works to follow. She has choreographed the Nobel Banquette and 2 dance films, Elevation and Artificial Body Voices, produced by the Swedish Television. Her most recent work include 2 experimental operas, Callas, Medea for the Croatian National Opera and TheTale of the Great Computing Machine, commissioned by the KTH Royal Institute of Technology. Getting to discuss her work with her about art, robotics and AI was a great honor, and I'm grateful that she participated in the podcast. I hope that you enjoy the program. Could you give a brief explanation of the history of opera and the different themes and histories and genres that it has gone through?
Yeah, it has been there for several hundreds of years, of course, and in the beginning it was not called opera. It was just something that appeared around the 1600s, something like that. Monteverdi was one of the earliest opera composers, and at that time in the Baroque area, they often was the story was about mythological creatures and myths that has been there from the Greeks and that kind of history, the drama. And then there came the classical and the romantic music, and then the verismo, as you mentioned here also, where they more told the stories of more average people, like Verdi and that kind of stories. And also the music followed the music history of the classical music in the Western art music. Nowadays it's I think the composers and also the people creating operas, writing librettos and so on, we work in different tracks, so it depends on what the creators are interested in. It could be mythological things, it could be like in our opera, the Tale, which is a speculative opera about a far future times when the computers had taken over all the society. So I think, that's a really brief history of opera. Yeah, and in the beginning, it has always been working with kind of new technologies. The stage machinery has been developed from other kinds of mechanics, and they have been using the contemporary technologies of their time already in the 1700s and 1600s. So it's an art form that has been developed in parallel with also theater technicians and the technological development.
And one reason I actually mentioned Wagner in the questions that I had sent to you was because of his slight fascination with the technical aspects of the opera and what he could basically get away with in the building of his own opera house. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the current state of the machines that we are using in opera? And it is perhaps becoming slightly more digital in many operas.
Yeah, and also when the term technology, there are also techniques in singing, and when you learn and practice techniques and teach your own body and voice to do new things, that's also kind of techniques. So we use the same word and also for technologies, and now we can also create performers that are not human, that performs, that move and sing and make sounds and do things like that. So it's that developing technology means for a singer that's also a way of develop new technologies and new ways of moving and singing. That's also kind of development in the art forms also. So it's not, we don't play on the same instruments, we don't sing with the same kind of voices, we develop new ways of moving bodies and singing. So it's yeah. I don't know if that's
no, it's actually a point of fascination for me as someone who always enjoys thinking about music. In certain ways, for example, the violin hasn't really been changed in its structure for about at least 200 years or so, or 100 years.
Yeah, but the strings are different.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they do some kind of manipulations with these old instruments to make them sound as we want today in an orchestra. So there are some development, yeah.
So the question is, do we, when it comes to at least human singing, have we evolved? Have we developed things that we weren't, well, not necessarily to say capable of, but we had never thought of and just have recently developed?
Maybe, yeah. And I wouldn't say that it's better or that it's a development that increase or become better. It's just different. It's different ideas about how a voice should sound or what yeah. So and it also depends on the music around, like an orchestra with a very strong sound, then the singers have to sing in another way compared to a more soft ensemble like the Baroque musicians and so on. That's yeah. And then the expressions becomes different, yeah.
And
so it's kind of
no, I can. What I think is that, considering the constraints that certain people might like to have on what an opera is, what barriers are kind of looked at a bit of a taboo when they are broken at the moment?
Yeah.
Are there any things that you, for example, yourself had to think about or had faced any resistance when including?
Not really. I think it's not really taboos, but it could be that this is not what they expected. But I think to understand what someone or I expected, then I have to break it. So being on the edge or on the other side of the edge, that's a way to also to understand what we expect or what is a body, what is an opera performer, what is a dancer, and so on. When we break those traditions or the habits or what it usually is, then we also understand something about what it is. I think, yeah. So we need to be there.
And what are the challenges of developing a whole new opera and trying not to necessarily emulate previous forms to create something that is slightly unique, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it's not unique in all senses. It could be something that is unique, because if everything is unique, then it's not opera anymore, or not even music, or not even dance. So that we play with the expectations and rules and not rules and patterns and traditions and then we bend and do things with that. So, yeah.
And when you were developing, for example, one of your own operas, if we go to the most recent one, what is the process that you have to go through in terms of how to develop the opera itself and the libretto and the music all together?
Yeah, since we in that opera we also work with our new developed instruments, or interactive musical instruments, and also robots, and so, which means that usually in an opera production in an opera house there is a procedure where the rehearsal starts, and the singers, you hire singers to be the performers. But if I want to create a new, like a robot or a new instrument, that development has to start several years before. So it's for us it meant that we worked at least 2 or 3 years with developing the performers, the non-human performers of that opera, and also the libretto we worked on in parallel with this development, because we based the libretto on a book that was written in 1966 about a future where the computers had taken over all the society. And then that opera was, the book is more like a monologue, and we had to create characters from that opera, characters that we could that met each other in all these scenes in the performance. So and that also take a lot of time to create the libretto. But the libretto and also since we were in the reactor hall, we already know the space, so there is not really any added scenography. The space is already there. So when I was thinking about the scenes, I already were thinking about where the singers and the dancers and this hook was moving, and all the projections and the theater organ that is also a performer in this performance. I was thinking about all these things already when we wrote the libretto. So it was not that somebody write a libretto and then somebody composed music based on that libretto. It was created in parallel, and I also worked very close with Carl, my husband, who's the composer of the opera. And some scenes there is the dancer creating the sounds, so then the dancer become the musician in a kind of improvised way that is not composed, but rather just we give her some opportunities, and then she plays the organ music with her movements. So it's quite a different way of composing and constructing and choreographing all at the same time, and writing the text, the manuscript.
And could you just give a brief description of the Hannes Alfvén book and the opera?
Yeah, the Hannes Alfvén book, it's the tale of the great computing machine. It tells a story like from a far future, like hundreds of thousands of years in the future, when the computers has taken over the society, and it's told as if it was a historian telling the story of how man developed from the animals and these very early living creatures many hundreds of years and millions of years ago. But usually we see the human as the crown of evolution, but for computer it's the computers and the computer society. We are just one step on this in this evolution of the computers, and in the early stages when so the computers they needed humans to be developed, and they needed especially the mathematicians to be able to develop the computers. And in the first scenes, the humans and the computer, they work together in a kind of symbiotic eras where they interact and do this together. But then at a certain point in the opera and also in the book, there is the great catastrophe when everything is just turned down, and electricity doesn't work, and it's dark and nothing works again, and then computer decides that we cannot collaborate with humans anymore, so we have to do this on our own. And then the in our performance, the robots and musical instrument, they take over and perform the opera. But in before that, there are also different scenes and scenarios where, for example, a medical doctor or the computer is telling her that she can't really do her job. She doesn't know what she make the wrong decision about the diagnosis, and so her whole practice and knowledge is criticized by computer, and so she cannot be a doctor anymore, so she has to leave, and also a human person, a person who tries, an older man tries to get his money out of the bank, but the computer says that you don't exist, you can't show me that you are a human, so I can't give you any money, I can't give you anything, and you have no identity. And that, so it's also this, that when computers is so convinced that they have understood everything that humans want, and the society is what is needed in society, but it shows in all these scenes that the computer doesn't really understand, but she's very like this. She thinks that she knows everything. So, and then the society collapses, and then the computer society takes over, and they create their art, and they create their own music, and their own everything is digital and kind of AI. But it was not called AI in those times. It was more called the computer brain, and they used that kind of terms. And then they also ask, what should we do with the humans now when we don't need them? And so that's basically the story.
Yeah. I think as someone who watched it, for me it was quite a Promethean theme. I mean, it is slightly the story of the gods giving humans the gift of fire, and then the humans revolting against it. We do kind of make that parallel quite often when we have any philosophical debates about AI, but that was kind of an interesting perspective to think about, passing the torch to the machines to some extent, and at what point they become independent of when the torch has been passed. But when, at which stage, better to say, in developing an opera, did you choose to use machines to, for example, perform?
That was the idea from the beginning, because we have been working with robots and digital music instruments in the 1990s, so we had these ideas about that kind of characters or non-human performers for many years. And then the KTH, they commissioned this opera because they know that we were working with that kind of non-human performance. So that was the idea already from the beginning. Not exactly which characters, but then bit by bit we found that this kind of machine could be that kind of character, and this kind of machine could be that kind of character. So I think that's an important and quite slow work to find the materiality and the movements and the sounds and the character, so that they become a character. It's not just the technology that and you learn to know this figure or creature.
And what was the process of developing new instruments and type of, you could say, performance for Evoke? I mean, it's a very, I would say, visual and also emotional connection that the audience has to make to those new objects, and how do you, in the process of developing them, what is going on? No, I mean, it is perhaps a hard question to put, but what I'm trying to get at is simply the fact that an instrument, before it has been used in a performance, is always not 100% certain.
Of course, yeah. So, but that's also what the musical content, or when the dancers interact with this voice, it takes time to develop and see what does this dancer or this performer do with the technology, and then it develops a kind of character. And that's also like in theater, it depends on different actors, and the same drama they make them in different ways. So it's also open for the human performers to somehow have an influence on the interaction and the character that we develop together. So it's both my work and the performers and the composers and the technology and all this, and then we have to trust our own perception, because then now it works, now this is something, this is interesting. So it's not something, the characters, they are not, it's not as if we already before know exactly what they should be. We know that we have this material and this technology and this singer and this dancer, and then it's like sculpting something, and then suddenly you see that now this is right. Now just work on that and develop that. So it's a collaborative work, and then you have to trust that if I react and when I see that this works, then I have to trust that the audience also will, even if they will not think exactly the same or do the same, have the same associations or think but that's.
Let's then ask a slightly interesting question about which performers were the easier one to coordinate. Because I'm now just thinking, because human dancers and singers, you have to try to adjust the book for them in a certain way and direct them, but also machines. And let's not think about the comparison so much, but as to the process behind it. How much, for example, during the process of preparations, did the work of the machines have to change, and how much did the performers have to change themselves? Well, the human performers.
Yeah, how much that. The negotiation about how to do things, it's so much easier with humans, because we can discuss and test and do things. It takes much more time to work with the robots. So, and the machine, how much? Can you ask a question again? Yeah.
No, let me give a perhaps description why I asked that question, because recently a new paper was published from Stanford, and in it they developed this new technique for the robotics department, where a machine could see you perform an action, and when you directed its hands, for example, to do that action, after doing it just once, it would learn to do it. And of course, that's a very big breakthrough that just came, I think, 5 months ago, or something like that. But of course, I don't think that was something that was accessible to you. So you had to probably program every movement that the machines had.
Yeah, but I think also I'm not so interested in working with the robots that looks like humans or try to look like humans. I think I'm more interested in the movement, that the expressive qualities of the movement itself. And it must not be like 2 arms and 2 legs and a face and a head and a spine. And this. It could be like just... I think a lot of in robotics, it's more about the work and the achievement outside the body that is interesting for robotics in industry and painting cars and doing things out there in outside the body. But the dancers or a stage performer, it's the movement itself that we want to be expressive. And it doesn't mean that it has to imitate a certain human, but it has to have that the expression of exactly this body that doesn't look like a human, but this is the expression of that, and you can recognize that expression even if it's performed by a body that doesn't look like a human. I think that's interesting, because then you activate the reading of the movements in the audience, and they have to, it looks like it's sad, or like it's happy, or like it's waving, or it's turning away, and this, the body language of we understand it even if it's not a human body that performs it. And I think that's more what I think is interesting with the robots.
And
usually they are not made to do that. So it's hard. So therefore I have also been building my own because then I can do that kind of work. And they are often very reduced compared to a human body. So it's more.
And what are your thoughts about anthropomorphism? I mean, should we get emotional output from human beings who see a performance by a robot who does not feel anything about what it is doing? Of course, the people who have coordinated the work have a strong opinion and artistic vision behind it.
Yeah. For me, I think it's interesting to create things that trigger associations in the audience. That's so. If they think they see somebody inside this body, that's the same with like writing a book. It's just like words on a paper, but then everything is happening inside the reader. That's the thing, and I think that's theater, that's opera, that's art. In my definition, it's not reality, but it's playing with creating something that starts this reading and association in the audience.
And what do you think about AI generated, for example, art that is not, there is no human behind it? To some extent, we could say. I mean, you know, if you don't look at the learning process, for example, and this is, of course, there are no AI physical performance, but if you just go into the realm of image generation, do you think that an audience's connection with it goes into slightly the uncanny valley in certain ways, but and just having emotions towards something that does not have any emotions itself, and the debate about whether it can be creative or not. But from an audience's perspective, do you think we should have any emotions towards or feel anything towards? Oh, it's not a question of should, but It is a situation where many artists feel both threatened about it, that a robot or a machine that cannot necessarily understand or feel what it is doing gets an emotional reaction from an audience.
But but that happens when you read a book or look at a photography. It's not reality. It's already artificial somehow.
But I think both, for example, in your work and, for example, a book, there is still this feeling that someone is behind it.
Yeah.
If you take that out, I mean, if we take...
There is no one behind this AI art. Yeah. Then.
Do you think we might even move to one day producing an
I think
opera
there will be
on that?
a lot of AI art. Too much. And no one will be interested in it. Or I shouldn't say no one, but I think there will be too much. But the AI, as it is now, it's always trained from something that is already there. So, like when they trained some AI to create the 10th symphony of Beethoven, but that's not what Beethoven did. He did something with what had happened before him, and then he created his first. So, artistic creation it's not based on patterns and rules that are already there. I think it's more interesting when humans do things that we didn't know that was possible. That's when you contribute with something new. And if the AI is just trained on things that it's already there, then it's not. I think, yeah.
That's actually.
It depends on what we mean by new, but it's based on already existing materials, and then it starts to build on already AI created material, and then it's like an inflation, just go round and round. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and it just perhaps floods the internet or wherever with new art. But actually, on that, do you believe that? I mean, many of the people that create art are influenced by others to create them.
Yeah.
And then there are like those few who create their own genre. If you say Picasso or Van Gogh or someone like that create something that was never necessarily seen before. In terms of how it looks. Can we necessarily... What I'm trying to draw at is simply the idea behind the opera, actually. Is there, do you think, a possibility for machines to create something new, to create something that can be perceived as art in a purest form, if we can define art in some way, of course?
It could create something that is different, yeah.
But in terms of creativity, you don't necessarily... And I'm not necessarily... I mean, at the moment, most machines that create art are just some sort of a mishmasher of large chunks of data.
Yeah.
But can just mixing up stuff lead to a new thing? Can it lead to a new...
Yeah, a new production, of course, yeah. But then there is also the...
And how should we perceive it, perhaps, as well? I mean, when, for example, it comes to your work, you are the artist, even though the machines might be performing. Yeah. So the human is behind it.
Definitely.
And that's the main question, perhaps, is that can the human be taken out of that loop? And do you think... I think personally, at least, that audiences are less willing to even give it a chance, from my own experience.
If there is no human behind.
If there is no human in the loop.
I think so, yeah.
But can we one day have a certain type of art that is created and there is perhaps an audience for it, and we call it proper art, not necessarily just filler.
Yeah.
I'm maybe drawing on too many philosophical things.
Because there is no one definition of what is art. It's something that we decide together with an audience, and I think it's not just the properties of something out there that, oh, this is art, this is not. It's maybe it's not even interesting to try to define it once and forever. So if it works as art in an art situation, then it works. So that's...
I think that's perhaps the issue that many people face, because that's perhaps it's a difficult question. That's exactly why perhaps it's a difficult question to answer, is when you involve emotionless factors that have performative capabilities into and make an audience have emotions towards them. As you mentioned, for example, a book to some extent is that. But when that factor behind it becomes slightly more than just a book, when it starts having its own mannerisms, then suddenly there is a separation. And of course we might not necessarily be able to define it, but there is a certain beauty to the fact, thinking of as the opera had its moment, like the machines at some point being able to create something. So yeah.
But and also when I like perform as a dancer, it's not that I need to experience. It's not my emotions that are transferred to you as an audience. It's the emotion that the bodily movements express that you perceive. It's not my emotion. And that's the same thing with the robots. It's the expression and the emotion
that
in the movement that you perceive. It's not so we don't need a human inside the robot to make the bodily movement be expressive.
It is,
and that's also my what it means to be a performer, a dance performer. It's not my emotions that is transferred. It's the movement that express this.
Do you think
and that's the knowledge that I work with as a dancer, choreographer, and also when I create the movements for the robots. So when they see, oh, now it's expressive in that way, okay, then it's fine. Yeah.
I mean, then we could say, for example, that the dancer, we get to choreography, but what we perceive as the art of the dancer is what we project as the art, and not what necessarily is what the performers want to convey necessarily always.
Yeah, and not, maybe not what the performer experience, but the performer knows something about movement, and that it's shaky movement in the end with the dancer that really triggers emotions, but also it triggers emotions in the dancer. So when I start to shake, then I trigger emotions in myself also, but I think also I trigger emotions in the audience
and
by doing that. So it's the movement that I experience it from starting to shake, and you experiencing it from seeing someone very shaky and trembling like this, and then we understand the movements of others, and Yeah.
And actually, I think that perhaps gives the best example of how to ask the question I've been trying to get at, and kind of not necessarily finding the best words for, because it's such a complex thing. But it's the fact that is the emotions of the performer part of the artistic experience, or can that be taken out and still an audience feel and be able to project?
I think, and also like this example with the shake. We shake when we laugh, when we cry, when we are sad, when we are happy. So it the same kind of movement, and then we understand the emotion when we add something else. You see the face, or you hear the music that is played at the same time, and you see other things in the body, not only the shaking. So it could be laughing, and it could be crying, and it could be so this kind of same movement could then be charged with different emotions depending on the things around and other things that happens in the body at the same time. So it's not just one emotion, often it's a combination of expressions that together create a complex emotion rather than straightforward happy, sad. It's not like that. It's a sadness combined with sorrow and happiness and love, and so it could be, usually it's combined expressions that create an emotion that is complex rather than just simple.
And what do you think your job as the choreographer, how do you coordinate that, and how do you make that a whole performance out of these separate emotions that you kind of put together?
Yeah, and that's the sculpturing of things, with the artists and the technologies and the sounds and the music and the text. And the text could say something else than what we see, and that creates a kind of tension that is, how can she say that about that? And then you start to work the perception and the experience of what you...
And what emotional... I mean, it's for a viewer, I think it's always viewing a performance... A longer performance is a kind of a bit of an emotional road trip. What do you personally, I mean, this is just a personal question, what do you personally like to convey to audiences?
Yeah, that's what really this physical performance is, because then you go into a room and you sit there, and we know that they will be there for 1.5 hours, like 90 minutes or 3 hours or so, and then we can create this road trip throughout the work, and I think that's very different from sitting in front of your computer, because you can stop it anytime and you can do other things and you can be distracted, and that's what I like with theater, and that we can we can create a journey, a longer journey, and also as an audience, and give that time to it instead of being entertained every second and minutes. So it's a little confused, and then so it's very much a composition in time, that in front of a screen we don't do that.
And as a
maybe it's not the answer to the question.
No, I mean, it's a fascinating answer, because it just kind of, in the modern era of the attention spans are very short, having to sit for long hours and think about a performance and go through like those different emotions. When you go through that performance as a holistic experience, is very different. But I also wonder if, you think that in the modern era, not just with new performances, but even the old ones have had to go through any changes to adjust for?
Or maybe the other way around, that people really want this also, and not only this fast, short things. So I don't think we need to change that. But of course, the early operas, the Baroque operas, sometimes they are like 3-4 hours long, or maybe even 5. And at that time, people were eating and talking and doing other things at the same time. So they were not sitting still and just watching and listening to the performance. So our opera, I think it was like 80 minutes or something like that. And that's much shorter than these Baroque operas. So.
But do you try?
But I think that we couldn't have had a break in that opera. We decided it wouldn't have worked, because the audience should not be able to go out in another room and do something else and then come back. No. It must be just one process. That was really clear early in the process of developing the performance, that we cannot have a break.
And what are if we make it like a curve of the emotions that you put the audience through a performance, and I, as someone who viewed that opera, I actually completely agree. That it really didn't need a break. Sometimes between acts, some operas, of course, need perhaps it's a good thing for the audience to rest, to allow the passing of the time. But what are the experiences that you would like the end result, if the dovetail, as they say, for the that emotional experience be for the audience? For example, in the opera that you did,
yeah.
In your works, generally speaking, not just the one.
For me, I think it's interesting if it triggers the audience to start to think about these existential and philosophical things. And it's not that the performances has the answer. It's more like trigger questions about this, and thoughts and contemplation. That's what I aim for. Yeah.
And what do you think about the repurposing of older works and reimagining them, for example, sometimes? I was at a performance of The Ring that was done at Göteborg a few years ago, and they kind of completely changed the themes around it to be about climate change.
Yeah, and maybe you can do that with that kind of work, because it's the text and it's the music. But I think it would not be possible to do that with TheTale, because should it be other robots? Should it be other... I think it's hard to restage it. Not for us, but that could be interesting. But it's many things in the scenes that are not written in the libretto or in the music. It's more like indicated, and then we create these scenes together with the performers and the technologies and the things. So, yeah.
And what influence do you think your work might have in the long term? And do you think more works like yours will be coming into the main stage?
I don't know. It's there are, of course, other opera creators that work with different technologies. So it depends on what we mean by similar works. Yeah, but using technologies, of course.
It is. I mean, for me, as someone who attends operas quite often,
Yeah.
always a bit of a point of fascination that we are kind of still doing performances from the
Yeah.
18th century or the 19th century, and the audience is, of course, in love with those. And there are many other operas that have been developed throughout the years, but we kind of like to stick with the old. And I think perhaps it's to some extent because there are so many new works that come out, but there are many who try to innovate in many ways, and how to bring a new audience, or perhaps how to bring that audience to take in the new.
But I think that they're quite not a huge audience, but many of the opera audience, they are also interested in new operas. So it's like we had sold out all the performances in the Reactor Hall and also at the Opera House when they performed like newly written operas. There are a lot of audience, so it's not that bad, I think.
So yeah, that's actually the
there is
thing.
an
I mean,
interest
do you think?
in new opera, yeah, also, yeah. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's actually an interesting point to think about, because I think the fascination with the old stuff is always, well, I mean, to make people give chance to new things is always interesting. Of course, your work, I think, was a bit too good to ignore, but there are some things that are much more, I would say, like experimental in terms of the music and what they try to convey, and perhaps it gets filtered out through history, so the good stuff remains and the lesser known ones kind of disappear. But what do you think about the future? Will we have more? I mean, when we talk about the technologies that are involved, how much more technology will we involve in operas, in the sense that, as we discussed earlier, how much will human performers play a role and how much will machines play a role in the future of opera?
I think that humans will play a big role in that, because it's seeing and hearing a human body performing in that way. It's an extreme way of using your body and your voice and develop those skills and this on the edge what is possible. It's a kind of virtuosity and also I think that in itself is very special, to hear that in a space and to experience it in the same room as the singer, a body that sings like that. But it's a kind of similar things with technology also, that if you can use technology or create, that also is on this extreme edge of what is possible for them, because for the technology, other things, it's much harder for the technology to be organic and expressive, and then is not what we expect from technology. So then it's interesting to try to make them expressive. While for a human body and voice, it's exciting to see them be very technical in an expressive technical way. So it's different things that is fascinating, depending on if it's a human performer or a non-human performer. So maybe sometimes it's the opposite. And
do you
the
think
combination of this, I think, can be is interesting.
And how, just based on your personal perception, how do human performers react to working, for example, with non-human performers?
Yeah, I think not all human performers want to do that, and maybe not most of the human performers. But in our project, we invite singers, and then we we try out things in workshop and see if they are, so that we know that they are interested in doing this work, because it changes their process in preparing for the performance also. So they have to be open and interested in doing that and changing their way of performing in collaboration and together with these technologies and so on. So they must be interested in that. It's yeah.
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 And just to think about the experience the audience takes from seeing human performers, do you think that we could develop certain emotions to specific types of AI performers as well? Or is that a...
I don't really understand what you...
No, I mean, when we see, for example, a dancer, we have a certain perception about the dancer as a human being, that, as we discussed earlier, the emotions that dancer is going through and what those emotions lead to which type of performance, even though we project them. But do you think that we can develop that type of emotional connection with machines as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and also, but what we have been experiencing throughout the years is also that when the dancer's movement like influence the sounds, it can, the relation to space can be different. So the dancer feels a kind of resistance in space based on what she or he hear in the sounds, and then they start to move in another way that they haven't done before when their movement did not create sound. But when the movement creates sound, then I start to move in a new way. So it creates new choreographic material and movement also, and also for the singers when they interact with their own voice in this observer system, for example. The singers start to use their voice in a new way, and their expressions become different, and they can do other things, and so it's like an extension of their own performance when they interact with the technology, and then so it's not, it can be a way to find new expression in your own performance. So that's when I think it becomes an interesting character, when it's like looping around like this, that the performers singing and acting is changed by this, that their movements also create sound, or the voice is shaky, and then you start to shake with the body because that's what you hear, and then you trigger more shaky things, and so it has also changed the performance of the human performance, that they didn't know that they have those movements or sounds in their voice, because they.
A fascinating study was once done with putting a pianist in a hall with an audience and recording the whole of the sound of his performance, and also asking that pianist to perform in a room without an audience. And the results of the study could show a complete difference between the two performances. So there is definitely a reactive component between the performer and the audience, which is a give and take. And just technically speaking, it wouldn't necessarily be impossible to code that type of a loop behavior through reinforcement learning, for example, in a machine. But is there any value to that? That's the...
Yeah, but the thing is that then we need to know what is really happening. And I think that's my experience, that when I program the robots, and I think that I have programmed what I know about this movie. And then when I see it, okay, it's much more into this. I also have to simulate the gravity, and I have to do that and that. So I think that we think we know more than we do. And when with all this big data and machine learning, who decides what the machine should learn? And then usually there's much more into it than we think when we try to simulate it with the computers. So there is also humans behind the technologies and behind how the AI is trained and so on. There are always humans, and we don't know everything. It's like AI, the intelligence part of that. We don't know what intelligence is. It's something that changes all the time. If we know exactly what it would, then of course we can simulate it, but we don't know. We don't know what intelligence is, I think.
Yeah, it actually was recently, there was a 25-year bet between two people who were working on intelligence.
Yeah.
And one of them is, I think, David Chalmers, the other one, I don't remember his name, but one of them had said that by this year, because there is this very big perception and intelligence conference annually, we would have understood how intelligence works in our human brains.
Yeah.
And Chalmers had bet against that we wouldn't understand how human intelligence works. And, well, I think he won the bet.
Yeah.
So, and this was one of like the most famous bets in the that scientific area. But my question is simply that should we create loops in robots that make them react to an audience's behavior? Or because you could, as I think was with your opera, have machines that perform the same performance every time that you put them through it. And I think maybe still they won't be fast enough, but it won't take a year or two before we have technologies to make them have a certain degree of perception towards the audience's reactions and perhaps slightly change their behavior. Because as we mentioned, the humans do that.
Yeah, but it's not in a rule-based way, so I think it's hard to describe in what ways the audience influence the performers. And I think also, as an audience, I don't want to interact with the performance.
So,
the performers. Of course, the performers maybe can feel something about what is happening there, but I don't want to influence that. I think it's really, I really like this, sitting in the dark and it's happening there, and then I can move away with what's there and not be involved in that performance. It's like reading a book. I don't want to change the words and make it my book. No. There are, of course, people who want that, but that's not what not in that way.
Well, I mean, the interactions can be very minuscule, but to the degree that should it be when making a machine that performs a certain choreography, should it be hard programmed to do that specifically, always in the same exactly the same way, or should it be just given a general choreography? If, for example, say we have the capability to feed it just how it should behave, and then put a reinforcement loop inside it to say if, for example, the audience is clapping a bit harder, you can behave in and like perform a bit harder, I don't know, or something like that.
But I think for me it's more interesting if it could really listen to the music that it plays. So like a human, that it adjusts its movements in relation to the sounds that it creates through this interactive system. And that would be more interesting than trying to interact with the audience reactions also, but make it very sensitive to its own movements and the fine-tuning of the sounds. so make it, and work with that, because I think that would be interesting to see if it's possible.
And do you think...
And then also we need to teach it to be sensitive in a way that we think is interesting, and that's also with the performer.
Yeah, that's actually
that's
the thing.
The performers
is it
that
possible?
I like to work with performers that I experience when I see that they interact with music in a way that make me interested in that, and then there might be artists or dancers that interact with music in a way that doesn't really. I'm not so interested in that. So.
So let's try it as a thought experience to do that. Let's say we have a robot that you can program as a choreographer on its general behavior, but then it has a certain degree of freedom to interact with music, so that if a performance is made with a certain tempo or a certain part of it is pressed more harder, it has a reaction to that. Of course, we don't know exactly how performers do that.
No,
but what would you say are the best steps to try and do that?
Yeah, because then should it imitate me, or should it have its own way of reacting or adjust to that? But that a different way. When I choreographed the robotic swan, that is quite. It's not a heavy robot. It's not like that. And when I choreographed that, I trained. We were recording the movements, so it has this neck movements, and I recorded the engines recorded the movements, and then it played back the movements of the neck, the long and swan neck, and there were the wings. So I also recorded the wing movements for 4 minutes, and then I added the other wing. But then when the robot should perform by itself, gravity made the wings shiver in a way that wasn't there when I recorded the movements, because then I lift all the body parts with my arms, and so the robot body's relation to gravity added something to this performance that I really liked, because it made it a unique performer. So it was not only repetition of the movement that I had kind of programmed through the recordings, but it was added a quality of expression that made it even more emotional. And I think that could be.
I mean, it's a question of, if you allow it, if you program that into it, that is to say, if you program into it that it should not necessarily always behave exactly in the same way, is it still just confined within a certain function to behave slightly differently but in the same manner? Could that in any way be compared to the artistic freedom that a performer has when they have different reactions?
Yeah, but if it's programmed, then it's not freedom anymore. So I think the robot, usually they don't perform exactly the same every time. There are things happening and we don't know. And that's their character. And that's what is interesting, that they don't act in exactly the same way all the time. I think that's why I think it's interesting to work with them. And I wouldn't have wanted to also program this behavior, because that's something it's like you are another person than me, and this performer is another person, and that the robots also become a kind of person or persona with qualities that is not pre-programmed. So I think that's somehow it's important that everything is not pre-programmed, and that could be something that is already in this body. It's not something that I have decided. I don't want to control everything in that way. It's more something that you see that quality and you let it be there.
And now, drawing on some hypotheticals, do you think one day you will have a bit more robots that you could direct much more easier rather than just program them and tell them what to do?
I think that I will use more like motion prompting, and then use kind of AI to make those programming processes a bit more effective. Yeah, so that, because in the beginning, like for 25 years ago with the first robot, it took so much time to program this 3-minute choreography. But you also learn a lot by doing this. But I think I will use AI and movement prompting or kind of machine learning as a tool or assistant, of course. But then I want to,
And you also already, to some extent, answered this. But what do you think are the future of humanoid robots, the robots that look more and more like humans in art?
Yeah, they are more like toys, I think. I don't really know what... I don't think I will use those kind of robots. Because they are so obviously not human.
They are getting better and better, but
even this Japanese, but it's fascinating to see them,
And do you not use them? I mean, why, just as a creator, do you necessarily not like using machines that look slightly like human?
I think also what I have seen of really human life with the skin and all these things, usually they can do very easy things, that they don't move around and like a dancer doing everything.
I mean, not necessarily the
possible,
facial expression ones, but the ones that basically the humanoid body robots. Most of them actually don't have faces because of the uncanny valley. People don't want them to have faces and scare people, basically. But the walks that, for example, Boston Dynamics is doing, or Tesla, with the robots that basically could pick this glass up and
and also walk this for.
Yeah, the Boston Dynamics do like to make a lot of choreographies just for the ad videos.
Yeah. And of course that's fun,
But I look forward to.
But it could be that I think I would be more interested in working with one of these more like
quad pod.
Quad pod, and moving around in an interactive music space and create the moves. That could be interesting.
And one of my final questions about the story of the walk that you did. Do you think eventually, and this is just a slightly funny hypothetical, but there will one day come a day that robots enjoy art as well.
Yeah. But then, yeah, that was the end of the opera also, that it was kind of performing music and for the robots that performs the music, so it was just this, yeah. But how can we know that they enjoy it? How do they communicate that? If it should be really, if it's us humans who have taught them what it means to enjoy something, can we really say that they do that on their own premises? What would that be? What is it? A human that decides that the
Robot is feeling.
enjoy the performance, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of just knowing whether, like, when I'm sitting in front of you, whether I feel anything or not, or do you project them? So it's, the questions of emotions are always matters of projection, I think. But yeah, we'll one day see if Hannes Alvem was correct or not, I guess. And maybe your walk would be considered one of the prophetic walks of the robots, or not. We'll see. I mean, how the AGI type of research where it leads to. But I wanted to end by just asking you what you look forward to in the future in terms of the technologies that are developing, and what walks you would like to, what things you would like to work with and see as well.
Yeah, work with. I think this. Yeah, we are planning to work with robots and movement prompting and develop that process of how to create movements for kind of, or maybe not robots, but mechatronical creatures. That would be interesting to yeah. And what else? Since we have been working with this kind of things for 30 years, you see a development. In the beginning, we had to build everything ourselves, and it was not robust technologies. It was really they break all the time. But nowadays, there are a lot of things that it's already there, and you can use it, and you can develop it in different ways. And I think maybe that's also that we can use all this knowledge that it's already there, and we can use that to create new things with it. I think that's, and yeah.
And do you have any things that you wouldn't necessarily like to see? I mean, do you have any concerns about technologies being incorporated into art that you think might be a stretch too far, or perhaps not fitting?
I don't think it should be forbidden or something like that. It's more that, it can be overwhelming, too much things, just a kind of inflation in that nothing means anything. It makes it hard to find the things. We need some guidance in this is some music that I would like you to listen to, and then we can talk about this together. So we still need humans that somehow guide us in what.
And actually, on that, should we have the case where every human basically creates their own music and art for themselves, basically,
Yeah.
because the technology will soon be there, basically.
Yeah, but I wouldn't like to write books that I read. That's it. This solipsism, when it's just me. The thing is that it's interesting to take part in or meet something that somebody else has done, and it's not about me. It's not to get access to somebody else's thinking and creation that I could never have done myself. That's interesting. Not to see myself, my own, no.
Yeah, I think there is a danger that it boxes us into our own world and doesn't introduce us to new experiences, basically.
And it's boring to be only with yourself all the time. Of course, we need a lot of time with ourselves, but if that's the only thing you get, what you have, no, that's
so
like locked in.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically. I think these days we almost already have that slightly with music and the different providers of it, Apple Music and Spotify. They have developed algorithms that just basically give you the same type of music, more of it. So as a way to combat that, I always try to find music from different parts of the world to listen to. But I think we already are, sadly, to some extent going towards that. But there is also a potential for these type of algorithms to be used to introduce us to new things that we would have never been able to interact with.
Yeah, a stimulating resistance, that kind of tension. So, I don't understand this. I have to, and then it becomes interesting. Not that it's the same all the time.
So, in the hope of humans continuing to challenge themselves, and that I get to see more of your brilliant work soon, I want to thank you very much for participating in this podcast.
Thank you.